Hello and welcome to this installment of Cervell Software's Merchant Magic Training Series. My name is Ryan and today we'll be discussing how to receive your non-serialized inventory into Merchant Magic. This video will take a look at the 3 different ways one can receive non-serialized inventory. We'll be covering how to receive an item for the first time using catalogs, how to receive a non-catalog item for the first time, and how to receive an item that is already a part of your inventory. Before we get started, there are a few definitions and absolutely critical points that we need to hammer home. Definition 1. Non-serialized item. A non-serialized item refers to the products in your store that do not have serial numbers on them. These things might include ammunition, fishing lures, clothing, snacks, jewelry, and cleaning supplies, just to name a few. Definition 2. Catalog. A list of a particular vendor's products organized by UPC. Includes product information such as part number, product description, and other product-related info. In Merchant Magic, catalogs are used to reference product information for the products you are receiving. These catalogs are organized by vendor and can easily be updated through the catalog import utility. I provided a link to our how-to document in the video description below. Be sure to check it out if you're interested in updating your current catalogs or adding a few from vendors you receive from regularly. Critical point 1. The receiving module is used for instances where you are receiving inventory from a vendor. We consider a vendor to either be a distributor or a manufacturer. The receiving module is not to be utilized when you are taking in used merchandise from a trade-in, direct buy, transfer, consignment. There are other tools in Merchant Magic for those types of transactions. Critical point 2. It is assumed that you have already entered all of the vendors in your vendor database that you buy product from regularly. If not, you will want to take a moment and enter the bulk of your vendors via the vendor utility within Merchant Magic. This will save you time and streamline the receiving process for you. Though it is convenient and simple to add vendors on the fly in the receiving module, in the interest of time, your best bet is to cut right to the chase and put those vendors into your vendor database before you start receiving. Oh, and one last thing before we get started. In order for this video to make any sense, you gotta make sure your catalogs are turned on. From the Central Command Center, aka the Merchant Magic home screen, click on F6 Utilities and scroll down to Office. Click on Office once, then click General Description and follow the tabs all the way to the right to find the tab marked Catalogs. The option, if item is not in my personal inventory, I want Merchant Magic to check my catalogs, is selected, your catalogs are on and ready to go. If the option, I do not want Merchant Magic to check catalogs, is selected, click the first option, then hit the Save button in the top left corner of that window. Your catalogs are now on and ready to go. I'm ready to get started. Are you? Let's dive right in. To get started, we will need to grab one non-serialized item, such as a magazine, box of ammunition, or a shirt. If you have a barcode scanner, make sure you have it handy, but don't worry if you've ordered one that hasn't arrived yet. We can still receive inventory without it. Now let's head over to the receiving module. We will begin at the Central Command Center, also known as the Merchant Magic home screen. First, click on the Receiving button. Since we're just getting started, we're going to select the Receive with No Purchase Order button. We will save the discussion about receiving against a purchase order for another time. Once you click, you will be taken to the Vendor Selection screen where you will pick what vendor you're receiving your product from today. From here, there are 4 ways to pick your vendor. The first way is to scroll through the list until you spot your vendor and select them by double-clicking the name. This list shows all the companies in your vendor database who are marked as a vendor. The second way is to type the vendor's name in this box and click the Find button. Once that vendor's name appears, double-click it. The third way is to click the View All button and type their name in the search box. This will bring up all vendors, manufacturers, and importers in the list below. And lastly, if you can't seem to find your vendor, you can add a vendor on the fly by clicking the F2 Add Vendor button. It will take you to the vendor database where you will then enter your vendor's details and select them as the vendor you're receiving from. The vendor I'm receiving from today is RSR Group. I'm going to double click on them to select them as the vendor I'm receiving from. Once your vendor is selected, you're taken to the main receiving screen. At this point, you should see the vendor you selected in the top left corner. Remember, you will continue to receive from the selected vendor until you pick a different one. Today I'm receiving a Smith & Wesson magazine for an M&P 22 that holds 10 rounds of 22 long rifle ammo. I've located the UPC on the bottom of the box. Take a second to locate the UPC for the product you're receiving. Once you've located your product's UPC, make sure your cursor is in the barcode box by clicking on it with the mouse. Then go ahead and scan or type in your UPC. If the product you scan is in one of your catalogs, the catalog directory screen will appear. If not, you may want to grab a different product and try again until you find an item that's in the catalogs, but make sure you select the appropriate vendor from which you're receiving your product. Now my product was found in 4 catalogs: AccuSport, Elliott, RSR Group, and Big Rock. We're using the information provided in these catalog listings merely as a way to help reduce the amount of data entry we have to do manually. Notice that as you click each line, the product information fields below fill in with the information from the catalog entry. Click on each entry to determine which one works best for setting up your item. In my example, I'm going to choose the Elliott catalog because I like their description best. If none of the product descriptions are quite right for the product you're receiving, you can simply change the description to whatever you like by typing over it or adding to it. When you sell this item, the customer will see this description on their receipt, so make sure you consider that when deciding how to describe the product. After we've selected our catalog entry, we have to fill in any missing information. First, we have to map our item to one of our categories. So in my example, I will select the magazine category to map my item to because it represents the best fit. The product I'm receiving is a magazine, so it only makes sense to map it to the magazine category, right? For your example, you'll want to select the category that matches your item best. If you can't find just the right category, you can use the Category Quick Add button to create a new category on the fly. I also need to mention here, if the selected category also happens to have user-defined required fields, those too will be enforced here so that your item setup will be complete. For example, let's say you're receiving a shirt and someone set up the shirt category to enforce size and color. You will have to input size medium and hot pink, for example, at this time in these fields below. After we select our category, we need to map our item to a manufacturer. My catalog entry included the correct manufacturer for my product, so I don't have to select a manufacturer. Had no manufacturer been selected or an incorrect manufacturer had been selected, I would have needed to match it to one of the manufacturers in my database or create the manufacturer on the fly. The same applies for your item as well. Select the appropriate manufacturer from the manufacturer list, or if the manufacturer you're trying to select is not on the manufacturer list, create it with the Manufacturer Quick Add button. Next, we have our store part number. When selecting a store part number, your best bet is to go with the one provided in the catalog or choose the manufacturer's part number. A part number is kind of like what a social security number is to a person. Everyone has a social security number that identifies them as the unique one-of-a-kind individual they are. When choosing a part number, you can use any semblance of numbers or letters. Just remember it's got to be unique to your store the same way that a UPC code is unique. Followed by the store part number is the manufacturer part number. It's just another number identifying your product and inventory. It's used for reference purposes only. It will not show up on any receipts or purchase orders. This is not a required field, but if you happen to have the manufacturer part number handy, go ahead and type it in. This will allow you to find this item later if you do a search by manufacturer part number. After that, we have to input a description for our item. Remember, this description will appear next to the item on the receipt. Your customers will see this description, so keep that in mind when deciding how to describe your item. I'm happy with the given description from the catalog, so I'm going to leave mine as is. Lastly, you'll want to fill out any other required information in the user-defined fields here. If a field is a required field, a box will show up to the left which denotes that field is required. Once you've filled out any required fields, give everything a good once-over to double-check your work for accuracy and completeness. After that, we can press the Add to Store Inventory button. Once you click on it, Merchant Magic will bring you back to the receiving screen. We have now added the item to your Merchant Magic personal inventory. However, we haven't actually received it yet. We'll need to still provide more information about the item we are receiving. First, we need to select the date we received the product. If the actual date you received your product is in the past, simply select that date, and your receiving records will show that you received your product on the date you selected. If you have an invoice number for your item, and you input it in the invoice number field, you can later run a report for that invoice number and compare the Merchant Magic invoice to the invoice you received from the distributor. When the order has been filled, the two invoices will match. However, this is not a required field. The vendor part number is the place to store the part number that each distributor uses to describe your item. And we all know that most distributors have their own internal part numbers to describe an item. This is also used for purchase orders. In the quantity received box, type the quantity you are receiving. Today, I'm receiving 5. And if some of the items were damaged, then input the quantity rejected. For example, if you received 10 and rejected 2, then put in those numbers and the quantity received will show 8. Next, we have to provide the cost of the item we're receiving. This will feed Merchant Magic with the necessary numbers to calculate the figures on the profit and loss report once the item is sold. I've calculated my cost per unit for the magazine I'm receiving to be $15. You can set Merchant Magic to calculate costing by either cost averaging or last cost. Cost averaging takes the last cost given and the new cost and averages the two to determine the cost of your item. Last cost simply takes your new cost as cost per profit and loss purposes. If you're not sure which you have Merchant Magic set to, go to Utilities, Office, General Description, and navigate to the Default tab to find out. And last but not least, how much are you going to sell this item for? I've decided I'm going to go with the MSRP for this magazine and set my selling price to $32. And now that we've filled out all of our required fields, let's take a quick second to double check everything. If everything looks good, then go ahead and hit the Receive It button at the bottom of the page. If you have speakers, you'll hear a beep and the barcode will disappear from the barcode box. And that's it. You're all done receiving your inventory item into Merchant Magic and it's ready immediately to be sold through point of sale. There is no time lag. Once you receive it, it's ready for sale. If you look at the right side of the screen, you'll see all the product information for this item you've just received. Barcode, part number, price and cost, and on-hand quantity. You will find all of this same information in the inventory screen for this barcode. Merchant Magic comes preloaded with many catalog items, but you will encounter instances where you scan a UPC or enter a part number and that item is neither in your personal inventory nor in the catalogs. In this case, you will have to enter the item on the fly, as we call it. Or, if your catalogs are turned off, then you will always have to receive new items on the fly without the assistance of the catalogs. Let's take a look at how that's done. We're going to receive a bottle of water that does not happen to be in any of our distributors' catalogs that we have preloaded. We will pick the A1 Water guys as our vendor. We do not have their catalog loaded. Place your cursor in the barcode box and enter a barcode for a bottle of water. This is a fictitious bottle of water, so I'm going to use the fictitious barcode 12345678 Remember, scanning a barcode and typing in a barcode's number does the same exact thing. Your scanner is simply a fast typer. In this case, the quick add screen will appear, and you must fill in the necessary fields. But before we get there, let's take a closer look at this window. Notice these squares? Throughout Merchant Magic, these red clovers indicate required fields. Information must be placed in those fields before Merchant Magic will let you proceed. The F2 copy button's function is simple. It will copy the barcode into the part number field. See these undefined fields? If you select a category, category-specific required fields may appear here. A great example would be when picking a revolver. The manufacturer, model, caliber, and type would then become required. If you type in a part number that is already in use, the system will tell you and will ask you if you want to use that number. Also, you can add a category, importer, and manufacturer on the fly when using the quick add screen. This will drastically cut down on the amount of navigating you must do in the system and streamline the data entry process. Let's take a few seconds and enter the information. I'm going to click the F2 button and then I will enter a description, pick a category, and select a manufacturer and importer. I'll have to add a brand new category and department because I don't currently have a snacks category and department already set up. All of these fields should look familiar from our example during the first portion of the video. I'll also take a few seconds to input my maximum to keep in stock in my reorder point. It is critical that I do this because I want my reorder reports to alert me when my inventory runs low for this item. I will set the maximum to keep in stock to be 20 and my reorder point will be set to 10. This means that when my on-hand quantity reaches 10 or below, this item will show up on my reorder report, and I will know that it is time to reorder it, and it will even let my employees know that I don't want my on-hand quantity to ever total more than 20 items. If I leave the reorder and maximum at 0, this means that I don't want to be alerted via the reorder report when this item runs low. In other words, it means that I am not interested in reordering this item. If you leave it at 0, don't fret when your reorder report is empty. Let's click the F7 Add to Inventory button. Remember, all we've done is define the item. I am now back at the receiving screen where I will enter the date received, quantity received, today's cost, and the selling price. This should look familiar as it's the same steps I did in the first portion of the video. When done reviewing your inputs, click the Receive It button. Your inventory has been updated and you are ready to receive your next item. In the last two examples, we added a magazine and a bottle of water. Once you have received an item into Merchant Magic, it will forever be in your Merchant Magic inventory. The whole process of receiving then consists of scanning a barcode, adding a few details such as quantity received, date received, cost, and price. To show you what I mean, I will receive the magazine from the previous example. Look at how easy it becomes. Notice the description shows up at the right side of the screen in the Inventory Summary and Product Summary box. This is because Merchant Magic recognizes this barcode as an item that has already been set up in inventory. But before we start providing information for receiving this product, let's take a quick detour. If the item happens to be on someone's special order or layaway, like this magazine happens to be, a bright orange box will appear and alert you in a very forthright way that the item you are about to receive is allocated. At that time, you must make a judgment call. Do you check who it is allocated to by clicking the Allocate button in the bottom right of the screen? Do you set it aside for that person, or do you choose to ignore it and put the item on the sales floor? The point is this: the alert is there to let you know this item is allocated. You can choose what you want to do at this point. Now let's go ahead and hit the Allocate button so we can see the detailed allocation screen. From here you can see who the item is allocated to. You can even click the View Actual Receipt button and view the receipt itself. Let's close out of all these screens and return to the main receiving screen. We took a little detour with this item being allocated, but let's get back to the receiving process. Let's enter an optional vendor invoice number so that we can later pull a report by invoice number. Then enter the date received, quantity received, quantity rejected, and today's cost and intended selling price. Given the cost and price were entered previously, the cost and selling price fill in automatically, and we can choose to change it or reuse it. Let's review our inputs at the left of the screen and then hit the Receive It button. Our item has been received into Merchant Magic. The inventory summary at the right will now update and show you the new on-hand quantity, cost, and price. One other important point I should mention here: you can continue scanning barcodes and receive multiple items from the selected vendor without reselecting them. The vendor shown here is the vendor you are receiving from until you change it otherwise. And this concludes the tutorial section. Here's a few frequently asked questions that may interest you. That's a great question. When you receive an item into Merchant Magic through receiving, the following occurs. An item is created in the Merchant Magic inventory module if the item is new. On-hand quantities are updated, and an entry is also added to your inventory audit log. Each time you receive an item, you are adding entries to your receiving log. The receiving report and receiving log are your one-stop shop for finding information about your receiving history. With these two reports, you can look at historical data such as your receiving history, specific information about items you've received, as well as information about vendors and the items you've received from them. If you're still with me, great job. We've covered a lot of information today, but just like driving a car or piloting the space shuttle, there's a learning curve. With the help of these videos and a little practice, you'll be a Merchant Magic Pro in no time. Here's a quick summary of everything we've covered today. Receiving a non-serialized item into inventory for the first time using catalogs. Receiving a non-serialized non-catalog item into inventory for the first time. And receiving a non-serialized item that is already a part of your inventory. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future videos and be sure to check out our other tutorial videos in the meantime. Bye.